Qlik back again. Today we're continuing our series on Qlik application automation, and we're going to be specifically looking at an output block. I want information that's in my automation to be put into output so that I could read it and see what's going on. Let me tell you what this particular automation does, and then I'm going to show you the idea of output. First step is I'm listing the application. So this is going to go through in Cloud Services, pick this particular space ID, and get all of the applications that are part of that. What it does is it actually gets the application IDs that are part of the app. So within the block, whenever I'm working with lists, it's going to iterate through one by one by one, and I'm asking to get the application information. I want more data about that application. And then finally, I have a variable block here, and I've created an object as a variable because I want to have multiple items. I want to have a list of the application IDs, a list of the application names, a list of the description. I'm going to show you here that when I set the value for the key application ID, I'm basically pointing to this app information, the info, the attributes, the ID. I say get the app information, the info, the attributes, the name. I say, oh my goodness, I need to go get that. How did I do those other things? Well, I can come in here and I say, oh, here's the output from get app information. That's pretty handy dandy, isn't it? And I come down through here and oh, here's my ID and here's my name, and aha, that field is what I want out of this information. And so let me save this and I go run this thing, and I'm going to get a list of my apps, their names, their information, and I look at my output and it doesn't have any output. I get to see that it ran 7 times, and I get information because I get all the information about the execution, but there was no output. Well, that's why we're doing this video. I want output. So I'm going to take this output block that comes from our basic building blocks, and I simply drag it down to my screen. And you'll notice that it defaults here to saying, I bet you want a list of the apps, because that's really the one that's connected. That's the next logical part of that flow. These things are inside of that block, that looping block. And so I come down here and I say, no, I don't really want the apps. I'd rather have the application. And so I say I really want the application in there, not the list items. And so now I can go ahead and run this, and I'm still here in my output, and as it goes through the list, it gives me, hey, you've got this application called AR that had this ID, but that's just one. I had multiple apps in the block. It says I had 7, but I only get to see one. Well, the reason it defaulted to this is because, as I said, that's really the previous thing in terms of what this guy sees. And when I said I want you to use the variable here to go into this, it used the last known variable. And if I look at the settings for the output block, it says add this output to the list of all the outputs. So this one is really part of what ends up getting shown at the end as output. And in order to list all 7 of these apps, I need this block to be inside. And the beauty of this makerspace with Qlik application automation is I can just drag those blocks around. Oh my gosh, I completely put this in the wrong place. Let me change that flow. Let me change the way I've choreographed this workflow, this process. And now if I run this, you're going to see something amazing. I now get to see all 7 of those applications, not just my last one. And doesn't this look incredibly pretty? And even our choreographer would be happy with the way that this data is displayed. Thinking of doing something like dragging a block inside of a loop or outside of the loop is something that our maker probably would be the one thinking of, but it certainly could be used by either, then, can it? Well, our enterprise architect has said, that's fun and games for you guys to do by hand. That's great. You got a list. Now you write them down on a piece of paper and you do something with them. Good for you. What I need this automation to be part of a larger enterprise process where I'm documenting all of the apps that are currently available because I want to compare to see what apps got added in a particular time frame, let's say. Oh my gosh, that must be super duper hard. There's no way we could do that. All right, well, not really. You're watching this video because you're thinking it's probably pretty easy, and it is. Every automation is going to have a start block. Normally, that's going to default to manual. I want to come and run this thing here, and I want to do these steps that I can't figure out by hand. All I'm going to do is say I want to trigger this from something externally. This trigger could be from a Qlik app. This trigger could be from a completely other RPA tool like UiPath, for instance, or it could be from something called Postman that we're going to use here, which is just an independent. I just want to look at REST APIs and see how they work, see if my inputs are correct, see if my outputs are correct, etc. All I do is I copy this URL. It hands me, hey, Mr. Enterprise Architect, I play very nicely in your space. Here's what you need to call, including the token that you would need to call me. So I copy that. I am going to press save to make sure that this information is behind the scenes. I'm going to go ahead and toggle over to my Postman. Don't get worried about this. There's an awful lot that this tool can do for you. It's completely independent. All I want to do is paste that URL, and wow, the tool is nice enough to parse out that token piece because it knows that's a parameter. This is the key. This is my value. And now here's the incredible thing. If I press send, it is calling this application automation out on my tenant, and wow, I get that that output formatted for me. And isn't this funny that in our automation, our choreographer thinks that that table view is pretty, and a coder, an enterprise architect, thinks that this JSON format is pretty. Now, I can also change this to text, and this is something that REST API people would know, right? But the big key is that within seconds, I am able to transform an automation that is running completely isolated or needs me to poke at it and run it by hand, or that maybe I schedule this thing to run daily. This can be called by the outside world because application automation can consume other processes, but it can also be part of a larger process. Whether that process is things by hand that are kicked off and triggered by analysts taking action in their apps, that's kind of what active intelligence is, or whether it's a completely much larger DevOps type process and world. Hope that you have a great day and you're excited to continue digging into Qlik application automation.